Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. On the show today, we will get into some talk about that national championship game last night. Yeah, it's breaking it down, giving some takes on it, and for us Texas fans, kind of a little bit of pain watching that game last night. We'll get into all of that. Get into some NFL talk, playoff predictions, coaching predictions. A lot of coaches in the coaching carousel is starting up in the NFL. We will get into that. We will get into who else may be ending up out of a job in the NFL. Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day. And of course, we'll talk some more Texas football, some Texas basketball as they take on Cincinnati tonight. Some other Big 12 games happening as well, getting you ready for the Big 12 season. Some NBA talk as well. And of course, your text messages. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. If you guys want to join the show, you can text in right there, 512-447-3776. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. We're going to talk more about the championship game in the 5 o'clock hour, but it'd be remiss to not start off after having a big national championship game, talking about it a little bit. And Michigan wins 34-13. It was not surprising that Michigan won. Michigan was one of those teams that all season long felt like they were the best team in football. Georgia was in that conversation a lot, but teams that felt like they could be dominant. And so it's not necessarily a huge surprise. I thought Washington would keep it a little bit closer, but I also thought we were going to see the Washington we saw against Texas and that we saw against Oregon. We've seen some other big games. And that team did not seem to show up as much. And a lot of that's credit to Michigan. I don't want to take away credit from Michigan and what their game plan was and playing bully ball. And they came out and played bully ball once again and got the job done. But for Texas fans, it was somewhat disappointing to watch some things that, you had seen and, especially in the first half, watching them run the ball all over Washington and knowing that Texas was running the ball well. And I get it's not the same thing with Edwards and Corum as it is for Baxter and Blue. And I think Baxter and Blue could do a good job. They were doing a good job, but, they both did have fumbles, and you kind of worry about using them at that amount of times. And I don't think either one of them was going to get 23 carries like Blake Corum did. But you expect Quinn Ewers to be able to throw the ball as well in that game. And we saw it at points in the third and fourth quarter when Washington was starting to come back and was still in the game that they were starting to slow down the run. And they were starting to figure it out and sell out on the run and trust J.J. McCarthy to make a pass. And that's where Texas, you felt, always had that advantage that some other teams may not have had, was that Texas could run the ball really well. And then you throw in the passing game. And that team, if you had to sell out to stop the run at Texas at any point, Texas could have just been indominant. But really, it came on the other side of the ball for Texas fans, watching Michael Penix Jr. not just play the same amount of game. Dylan Johnson clearly still hurting. He had a lot of injuries at the end of the season, gets hurt again in the Texas game, and then immediately stepped on in that game. And it just ends up with Texas or with Washington not having enough gas to get through once they were down the same position Texas was in. And why it's so important in college football and really any sports, but college football especially, to get a lead, to be able to play from in front, because playing in front, you were able to, you can call your game plan. You don't necessarily have to switch up and just start kind of throwing for balls. You don't have to keep going for it on fourth down, where Washington felt that they were not going to get the opportunities and had to keep going for it. And once those, you get into a 4th and 13, because on that third down, they try and make a big play. And I think they should have probably gone a little bit shorter on that one, try to get some yardage. I think that at the end, they were also trying to get more, pass interferences and hoping to get the refs to bail them out. But in the end of the day, Michigan gets the title. They end up walking away with it at the end. The score was not really subjective of how close the game was. At the beginning of the game, seemed extremely one-sided towards Michigan. Washington made the game plans, made the good decisions. There was a curious point when Washington scores at the end of the first half. You're like, is Harbaugh going to screw this one up too? Is Harbaugh going to throw this one away too? He didn't. He was able to hold on and just run the ball and get some first downs, play good enough defense, keep blitzing on the outside. I'll get more into, kind of the difference in that defense in the second half when we get to 5 o'clock. We'll talk more about it with you guys on the text line too, all show long. But yeah, it was just disappointing as a Texas fan to think, man, if we would have played this Washington team, the team that Michael Penix Jr. wasn't putting everything right there, where Odunze just, dropped some easy passes and wide open balls weren't being put right on the number. And you think, man, all we had to do was leave him open. We were trying to guard him. And it wasn't working. So it was just disappointing as a Tex fan. But congratulations to Michigan. And if you're a Michigan fan or a Michigan man, then congrats on your victory. But, it just, I'm excited for the future with Texas. But, man, it was rough watching at points last night thinking, man, we could have been in this game. And then what could Texas have done against Michigan? I don't know. If they could have stopped what Michigan was doing, but we have a much better run defense than Washington, so that could have been an issue that we could have slowed down some and make J.J. McCarthy make plays, which he really didn't make a lot. But we'll get more into that in the 5 o'clock. We'll get in there. Let's talk some NFL. Let's start off the show with some NFL, and we'll get back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour. And, if you guys want to talk about it in your text, we'll always go with that as well. We might open up the phone lines today. Who knows? Phone lines might open today. I haven't done it yet, but who knows? If we get into it, we decide to do that in the next segment or, in a couple segments. We may get to that as well. I do want to talk a little bit of NFL as the playoffs have been set. We are now in the coaching carousel portion of football, and the coaches' firings are coming fast and furious. We had two that happened basically directly after Arthur Smith was fired Sunday night. That was a game where I guess Arthur Blank and the people at the Falcons had kind of already made that decision. And, they felt that there was no need to have the exit interview or to have any more conversations about it, that maybe it was if you lose to the Saints, then you're out. And if you win, we'll have that discussion. Or maybe it was if you don't get blown out by the Saints, then we'll have that discussion. But because of how that last game went, because of how there seemed to be a lack in communication between the two sides of, the general manager, and this is kind of a common theme with a lot of these teams, but you had a lack of consistency between the general manager and the coach, where the coach clearly wants to do one thing, and really, he trusts in Algiers. He's fine with Algiers being the running back. He's fine with that. And then you go out and get him another running back. And I think Bijan is a one-of-a-kind talent. He's, everything about him would tell you that he's special. And, you should, if you have a chance to get that guy and you want to be able to use him, then I get it. You should go get him. But you can't get him if the coach says, well, I'm not going to play him as much as you want because I want to play these other guys. Then it was a bad pickup. One of those guys has to go. It ends up being Arthur Smith. I mean, Kyle Pitts, you get him. He doesn't get used as much. Chris Olave, Drake London. You get him. And you don't play him as much. And, as much as everybody will say, well, you got to get your quarterback. That is another trend in here that they don't have their quarterbacks, but not everybody does. And, I mean, if we look at the coach of the year, who's going to win coach of the year, Stefanski, he's doing that right now with Joe Flacco. And he's built up the rest of his team, and he's got his rest of his guys playing at a top level right now in Cleveland. So it's not, as much as you need your quarterback, they spent all that money to get Deshaun Watson, and the guy's barely played for him. He's collecting his money. That fully guaranteed contract with him right now looks terrible. But they're winning, so why would you be that mad about it? You're just mad because you're writing the check, but other than that, you're pretty happy. Arthur Smith ends up getting the can in Atlanta. It's something that needs to happen. He is somebody that basically, as well as he did, I mean, he did well. Mike Vrabel gets fired today. We see at Tennessee, which a lot of people are shocked about that one, because Mike Vrabel does have a winning record as a coach at Tennessee. Mike Vrabel, we all know, is a good coach. And he's going to be sought after. I think there was a lot of discussions of, should have gotten a little bit more time. But again, they hire a new general manager in Tennessee, right? They hire the new general manager. And, that means that they pivot and they drafted Malik Willis last year. He didn't seem like he was going to work. They get Will Levis in. And, he seems like he may work. They may have found the guy, and it's too late for Mike Vrabel, as, his injuries and Will Levis just wasn't in early enough in the season. Then the injuries piled up and he wasn't able to finish out the season. They still do get a win, go out on a positive note for him and Derrick Henry. But if you see Derrick Henry's gone and you're kind of going into a new realm, in a new era of Tennessee football, you're not playing well in your division, it's time to move on. And some of these coaches, I think, a lot of people are talking about Mike Vrabel now immediately going to another job. It's like, man, you're a millionaire. You've got everything. And I know you don't want to take a year off and step away from the game and maybe do announcing or do whatever else for a year. Be an analyst somewhere. Just do something. Step away for a minute. But a lot of these guys, you feel like Frank Reich was a guy. Did you feel after he left Indianapolis, he just looked beaten? And to look beaten and discouraged and then immediately walk into a new place, it's hard. It's hard to be energized. It's hard to want to fight for every one of your choices and really go out there and fight for your players. And when you decide something, you say, man, I believe that this quarterback is our guy, and I believe that we need to draft this guy, and I believe on our defense we need to have this type of philosophy. And if you have all that and you walk into a general manager's office and that general manager is new and you are tired and you're beaten down because of years of just run your head into a wall, it's hard to then come out and perform at the level you need to perform at to be great in the NFL. So for a guy like Mike Vrabel, I get as much as he deserves to be a head coach in the NFL. I mean, if I'm hiring right now, I'd prefer to have someone who is hungry than someone who's been well-fed. I just don't think the person who's well-fed is necessarily going to come in and give me the boost that I need to start anew because I had to fire the last guy. We know Ron Rivera also got fired, another guy who just seemed like he was tired by the end of it. Take a year off, get a break, you get the new ownership. A lot of people saying this is now a top job because of the new ownership, because of the cap room, which, by the way, the Texans hired DeMeco Ryans. They are now third, I believe, in cap space available next year, and they're in the playoffs. I mean, that is a great future for Houston, but for Washington, they have a ton of cap room. They cleared all those guys off their books. They got rid of the guys they weren't re-signing. They said, we're basically starting over. You can pick and choose if you want to keep Sam Howell or if you want to go after one of these quarterbacks. We've got some picks. We've got cap room. We can start to rebuild. New ownership is willing to spend. And we can't do that necessarily with the coach who's in here. So we've seen that Ron Rivera is out, Arthur Smith is out, Mike Vrabel is out. That is who's out so far of our coaching carousel for the end of the season. Some of the other guys got fired in season, we know, like Josh McDaniels and Brandon Staley and Frank Reich, who, I mean, that's still, when you watch a guy, like if you were watching the Texans Titans game near the end of the season, week 17, and you see the Titans mess something up, and Mike Vrabel, for a good 40 seconds on camera, is sighing and rubbing his face. Just, this is not the team that he wanted to have and all of that. And you just wonder, do you really think that guy's going to walk into a new team? You think that guy's really going to be able to walk in to a new locker room and go, okay, guys, I'm hungry and I'm ready to go? Or do you think he needs a little time off? And I know he doesn't want to take it because if someone else is coming in and they, you don't want to turn down interviews necessarily. You don't want to turn down the opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL when there's only 30 positions and there's, 32 positions. There's not enough places for you to go. You don't want to turn one of those down, but also you may need a break to get fired back up again, to get ready to go play again. Panthers have also fired their GM, which, I mean, that one is a pretty simple. That one's pretty simple to go with, is that the Panthers fired their general manager because he made a huge trade and ends up trading away DJ Moore, what turns out to be the number one pick in the draft next season, and ended up with a quarterback that wasn't C.J. Stroud, who's playing really well. And we can debate all day long. I'm not going to say Bryce Young is a bust because he didn't have anybody there. And C.J. Stroud has more people around him. Clearly, they're a playoff team that's not completely on the back of C.J. Stroud. A lot of it is. A lot of it's done by his playing. But these are the positions right now that you're starting to look at. And general manager positions are a little bit easier to fill, I think, for as you can there's a much wider breadth of executives out there you can kind of look at and you can take an advantage of. I'm not saying it's easier to fire the right guy. I'm saying that looking for a general manager, I think you're not necessarily just trying to go after the top 10 offensive and defensive coordinators. You may be looking at different executives. Will McClay's name has come up a ton in general manager searches so far. The teams are starting to look after him. The executive vice president or whatever I don't remember what his title is for the Cowboys, but he's basically a de facto GM at the Cowboys. We know that Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones run everything, but Will McClay has kind of come up through scouting and drafting to be a huge factor in what the Cowboys do and with the Cowboys' success and some of the guys they've got. People really got to, people are looking at Will McClay. I think the Cowboys are going to do everything they can to keep him. We've seen Dan Quinn's name come up a ton with names of people that are asking to interview him, and I think he's going to wait. I don't know. I mean, he might do interviews. He pulled his name out of some of the coaching vacancies last season. He pulled his name out, which is kind of surprising to see Dan Quinn pull his name out of those, but also at the same point, I think there was where he was okay with what he was doing right now. And that difference of, well, I can be a defensive coordinator, I can work really hard, I can make good money for the Cowboys because Jerry's going to pay me very well, or I could go take over a franchise. There's way more pressure now. I have way more responsibility, and I'm going to make more money. I'll make more money. But at the same point, it's not as fun of a job. So it becomes much harder. I got to go now put together another defense where I put together this one. I get a guy like Micah Parsons who's playing out of his mind. I've been able to have kind of more freedom on the defensive end because Jerry and Steven don't want to touch that as much as they want to touch the offense. I've got some really good players. They've let me draft the guys I want to draft. I don't know if he's leaving for anything that's not a really good job, and Washington may be that. Washington with all the cap space where he can go out and try and assemble his team. I mean, if I'm the Cowboys, that scares me to go to let him go to a place where he has some freedom to go try and negotiate with some of your players in division. I mean, that's one that if Dan Quinn wants to negotiate a contract, be like, hell, I'm talking to the Commanders. And watch how quickly Jerry opens up that checkbook to not realize that he's going to be bidding against when Micah Parsons' contract comes up. And all these other, and I get they'd franchise tag Micah Parsons. We all know this. But, if you look at some of those guys on the defensive end that they've built, that they've kind of put on shorter-term contracts because they were paid for less or whatever else, that he could steal some of those guys away and make you rebuild that defense again with a different defensive coordinator who, and if you've got to get another defensive coordinator in Dallas, they're going to want to rebuild that anyway. There is some other names that we still have not seen anything. And by the way, the Mike Vrabel one, because we're going to mention Bill Belichick, is another name that is out there right now that there's still no reports on what they're doing. You didn't expect it to move quickly because it wasn't going to be a fired on the tarmac situation with a Hall of Fame coach with, one of the all-time greats. You're not going to do anything crazy to get him out. So you are, and you're going to talk about trades too, if you're them, because he's still under contract. So you're going to go and maybe behind the scenes call up a San Diego or call up a Las Vegas or call up a Carolina. I don't think you go to Carolina, but call up a Commanders and say, hey, well, if you'd like to talk to him, like the Steelers did with Tomlin, but I mean, they're in the playoffs, but the Steelers did with Tomlin. They go, well, if you guys want him so bad, if you give us a first and you think that he should be fired in, you want to give us a first, maybe we'll talk. But Bill Belichick, his name, he is more likely to be traded than I think any other coach. They talked about why Mike Vrabel, who is sought after and is a top-level coach, why he was not traded. And their response makes sense. As much as I don't like the Adams, their response was, we need to go find another coach. We need to set our trajectory forward. And if we're caught negotiating for all this time, and then the teams we're negotiating with are also looking for a coach, so they're way ahead of us in interviews, another team can kind of sabotage us by keeping us on the line, and they hire somebody else in 2 weeks, and we still don't have anybody, and now we cut Vrabel, and now we got to go find another guy. I get why they kind of just had to make the decision that they were probably not going to get a ton out of it, and it could really put them behind the eight ball, so I get it. I agree with that. Another name, so Bill Belichick, we know. I still don't believe he's coming back to the Patriots. People are either really believe he is or really believe he isn't, but the fact that the Crafts have not said anything makes you believe he's not coming back. The fact that it's a rebuild time still in New England. It feels like it's still pretty much a complete rebuild. You're in a division where you could hope that, the Jets have one more year with Aaron Rodgers and they're going to be up against it trying to find their next quarterback. And you could hope that Miami is a flash in the pan. You could hope that Buffalo is at the end of their rope in their contracts and that your division will open back up in the next couple of years. But Bill Belichick is not getting any younger. He's still 20-something plus wins away from the all-time coaching record, which is what people are saying that's what he wants. He wants to be the all-time winningest coach. I get it. Pop did it too. But to do that, I think he's got to go somewhere else. So we'll see what ends up with him. Pete Carroll, if we see what Pete Carroll is at right now, this is one where I think Seattle's fine with keeping him. I think they'd be fine if he wanted to part ways mutually and build off. He's done pretty well, but they're right in that middle area now, and it may be time where you kind of have to slow it down. And you don't have to do a full rebuild because you've drafted really well, but kind of press a reset button on that Seattle team where instead of trying to keep it afloat with Pete Carroll, maybe move on from that. Let him go decide what he wants to do next as he gets older, if he wants to move into TV and not have the stress of coaching, or if he wants to go back to college, or if he wants to go to another NFL team and see what he does. That'll be someone else to watch out for. The two other names to watch out for is Eberflus in the Chicago. It seems like he's going to keep his job as of right now. It seems like they've kind of missed the window of firing him, and it may be still this week, but if it's not by Friday, it feels like he's going to keep his job in Chicago. And if he keeps his job in Chicago, they may be keeping Justin Fields too. All those questions. They may be waiting on a trade package too for that number one pick. We'll see what ends up there. And then the last name you want to watch out for is Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas. That's one of the big names with Harbaugh, which, by the way, I've said from the beginning that McDaniels, the conversations about him being fired, it just seemed like Harbaugh to Vegas makes sense. But everyone's all right now is fully on the Antonio Pierce bandwagon. So we see that Antonio Pierce is continuing to get support from Raiders people, that they feel that this is what they need. One of the things Antonio Pierce has done, which has been exceptional, is the Raiders are the least penalized team in the NFL. That's surprising. You don't normally see that from player coaches, but that is a type of, accountability and discipline that you sometimes can get from a player-led coach. We can say, if you want to talk about some player-led team or some teams that are not good, Houston, Dallas, not great penalties. By the way, if you're looking forward to that Houston and Cleveland game, get ready for some flags. They're two of the top 5 most penalized teams in football right now are Cleveland and Houston. So that's going to be one. Plus, they got the same officiating crew that screwed them out of that Jacksonville game a few weeks back. They got that as well. But a lot of coaches to check out for in the coaching carousel. And, as it keeps rolling on, we'll keep you on here with names that are being thrown in to the coaching interviews. A lot of people are wondering if Bobby Slowick, who basically has one good year with the Texans and moving up, but he's part of that Shanahan tree, if he's going to get some love this offseason, Bobby Slowick from the Texans, if he's going to get some love. You wonder if Brian Schottenheimer and what he's doing now with the Cowboys, if that gives him some more, if someone wants to go talk to him, and other than Dan Quinn. We know Kellen Moore was interviewing for the Chargers position, even though he's part of that staff, so they're bringing him in, kind of getting those interviews out of the way at least, whether they're going to see if they're going to move on with him or not. Be curious to see what happens with Eric Bieniemy in Washington with Ron Rivera out. Does he move on? Does he stay there? Does he stay as offensive coordinator? Does he move up to head coach? What does Eric Bieniemy do? We see with all of that. And, we will keep you up with that as we keep going into it. It's just starting out, that coaching carousel. We're seeing more and more names pop into it. But it's a fun time of year if you're into NFL behind the scenes. It becomes a fun time of year. All right, let's get to Patrick's Big Fat Poll. We're going to take a quick break, and we will come back here. But let's get to the poll first.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day on the Horn.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day today, 512-447-3776 is the text line number. We know that Michael Penix Jr. disappeared in a big game, but it made me think about who is the best big game performer of all time. Any sport, anywhere you want to put it, who is the best big game performer of all time? Is it Michael Jordan? Is he on your list? Steph Curry is there in the NBA now? Or are you going to put it over to Vince Young and the Texas Longhorns and what they did in the Rose Bowl, what we saw in big games? There's a great story I believe Joel Klatt told the other day about him in an Oklahoma State game. I'm going to tell that when we come back from break. But who do you have there for the biggest big game performer, the best big game performer in all of sports, send that in on the text line, 512-447-3776. I mean, you put in there some baseball players that have done some really big things, and we always seem to get the big hits. There's a lot of names out there that you could throw in there. Who's the best big game performer of all time? Send that on the text line, 512-447-3776. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, play some sound, hook them up with Ian Rob B. We might even open up those phone lines if you guys want to talk some college football, some NFL football, anything else. We may open that up for you here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019 until 60, the Horn app and hornfm.com. Back on the sports complex here on the Horn, playing Bowie all week since it was his birthday on Monday. Just playing some Bowie. Why not? Always a good thing to play. Enjoying it, and any of those artists where I can just easily pull up and I have to pedal it down and knock it down to 12 songs is always good. You know, some of the artists you think you can get 12 out of, and then, you know, you get like 7 in, and then you're starting to pull some real deep cuts. If you got a favorite Bowie song that, you know, that makes a good intro music, it's got to make good intro music, though. There's some Bowie songs, too, that I like that I can't play because they come out and it's like a 18-minute intro. It's not really that long, but a longer intro and really slow and mostly wordy and stuff like that. I can't necessarily play with that. It's not gonna get me pumped up to do a segment. Can't get ready to bring the energy that you guys really, you know me for my energy, right? But if you got any Bowie songs you want to hear, let's see if they're already on my list. 512-447-3776. Also asking you who is the best big game performer of all time. Put that on the text line as well. And anything else you want to talk about? Coaches you think should be fired? Coaches you think shouldn't have been fired? Coaches you'd like to see hired in the NFL? Put all that in. Thoughts about the national championship game. We'll get into some Texas basketball talk. They go on and take Cincinnati on tonight at 6. Right at the end of our show, they will be starting off their game. We'll talk some more about that. A big game for Texas. Texas is not favored in. And it will be a big win for Texas on the road to get their season kind of pointing back in the right direction. But a lot of people starting to feel that Texas this may not be their best year, and they may need that recruiting class next year. You may see Chris Johnson get some more playing time. But who knows? Rodney Terry's turned a team that was underperforming a little bit and got them to overperform, got them to the Elite Eight last year, got them to a Big 12 title last year when that team was underperforming for a bit in Big 12 play. They underperformed at Pitts, and he got him back turned around. So we'll see what happens. And they lost one game. So we'll get more into that in the Cincinnati game. We'll talk about that in the 5 o'clock hour. But let's keep the show rolling right now. I want to play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. Rob Babers going behind the burnt orange curtain, talking some more Texas football, some good stuff, and the Jaylan Ford exit piece that he put out is in there as well, I believe. And it's some good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B, weekday morning 6 to 11, and we do the replays right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn right now.
All right. The Longhorns, obviously, with a lot of news, whether you're talking about guys they are targeting in the transfer portal, guys who are leaving, a lot of different news. So we'll try to get to as much of it as we can. Okay, so let's start with the Jaylan Ford farewell announcement because I thought it was pretty cool. I love these guys. And I'm sure it's Texas, but maybe they got their own, that they have these graphics departments that can put together these really cool videos to say farewell to the fans. And I'm glad that it pulls at the heartstrings a little bit. They're all sentimental. This one might be one of the most sentimental videos that I've seen from any of the players in their farewell videos. Jay Witt had a really nice one too. We talked about that one last week. But here's if you haven't heard it or seen it, go on Twitter. It's on there for Jaylan Ford. It's up there pinned for him. But it's Jaylan Ford's announcement that he's leaving, of course. But his announcement and his farewell to all the Longhorn fans.
Dear Texas, I hope by the time this day would come that my legacy here will be as good as some of the greats who have came before me. I never knew how fast this day would come, but they say all good things must come to an end. I give it my all to the school and to make sure I love Texas football better than what it was when it found me. While the journey was never easy, you taught me to be resilient. I lacked courage, but you made me fearless. And being great was only a passion, and now it has become my obsession. I would like to thank my coaches for the role that they played in my development. I want to thank the fans for the unwavering support. I want to thank my teammates who have become my brothers. And last but not least, I want to thank my family for always uplifting me. With that being said, while my time at Texas has come to an end, This is only the beginning. Thank you, Longhorn Nation. Hook 'em, 41 out.
All right, it's Jalen Ford's farewell message. See, they're getting more and more sentimental.
Loving the violin.
I know, right? Now, is that Sam Smith? Am I getting that right?
Oh, I don't know the song.
I think it is. I think it's Sam Smith.
Beautiful instrumental.
So bad at saying goodbye, something like that.
Oh yeah, so bad.
So
at
bad
saying,
at saying goodbye. Does that sound familiar? I don't know. I mean, I could be off about that, but I like Sam Smith. Anyway, but I digress. Getting back to my favorite part of it, because it's something that I've been preaching. Not saying Jalen Ford got that from me, but leave it better than you found it. People have been saying that for a long time. But leave the Texas program better than you found it. He actually, when we got a chance to speak with him, he said that the reason when he was asked why he didn't leave after his fantastic year last season, because he should have won Defensive Player of the Year in the conference, and why he didn't leave because your NFL stock was probably an all-time high. I mean, not saying it fell off a lot, but it's probably not as high as it was last year. His NFL stock was really, really high, and you know, in terms of linebacker, the value of it, all that will be considered. But he's a guy that's going to be drafted high enough, and I think he's a starter in the NFL.
Yes.
But the reason he said that he didn't leave had nothing to do with his prospects in the NFL. He didn't even really talk about that. I mean, that's what we were thinking. He said, "Nah, I didn't want to leave the program like that after the Washington game. I didn't want to. That's not the way I wanted to leave."
That goes to your point
Like,
of
I
what
didn't
can
want-
you do for Texas,
Yeah,
right?
he said, he said that's not how I wanted to leave. Basically,
That's
with a
pretty
loss
awesome.
to Washington. It ended up with a loss to Washington, I guess. But it was in the college football playoff as opposed to in the Alamo Bowl. So yeah, man, he's cut from a different cloth. Lowest rated recruit in that class. Guys built different.
Built different, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be the challenge for this Texas staff now moving forward. Is, you know, these guys who saw the worst at Texas, or some of the worst with a 5-7 year and
Yeah, man.
coaching changes and all the turmoil, or the tough times, I should say. You know, then help, you know, build it and leave a foundation that you hope remains, and that's what Sark has talked about. You know, we hope we maintain that with guys like Rojo, guys like Jay Witt, guys like Jalen Ford. You know, that those are the guys.
Culture bearers, man.
Yeah, it's culture bearers. It's got to be transitioned to this new group, and if it does, I think the trajectory continues to be very, very auspicious for Texas. But yeah, tip of the cap to Jalen Ford. He was quite a player, at Texas.
Hell of a player, man, no doubt. I mean, honestly, linebacker wise, he's going to be in the all-time great conversation. I mean, he had that kind of season, that kind of legacy here at Texas, and played most of this year with a hernia injury.
Yeah, he did. Wasn't 100%.
Yeah, so I think that was around that Oklahoma game, and I think, you know, it lines up with the eye test too. Like, what was wrong with Jalen Ford? Well, he's dealing with an injury all season long. All right, let's get to the Texas transfer portal. So Texas actually looking at wide receiver prospects in the transfer portal, and one of them is Oregon State receiver Silas Bolden. Apparently he is set to visit Texas. And this is according to Greg Biggins of 247 Sports reported that Texas is one of the 4 schools Bolden scheduled to visit to see early this week. At some point, he might already be on his way to campus or on campus. But so they're still looking at wide receiver targets.
Yeah, we've talked that they're gonna go. They need a veteran receiver.
He's a small, fast guy.
He's like 5'8", 160, but super fast.
Small, speedy guy. Yes.
Now, at least he on his social media says Texas has offered him. He put out that been official offer.
Yeah.
So that came from him, Silas Bolden. But yeah, they had the kid, the receiver from Liberty in this weekend.
C.J. Daniels.
A bigger bodied receiver.
6'2", 200, but man, he's really explosive. 21 yards per reception at Liberty, 10 touchdowns.
So they're working
different types. They could get up both of them because they're very different types of receivers.
They are 100%. And obviously Jonte Cook and that group, DeAndre Moore, are kind of the future at the position of wide receiver, but some experience. Matthew Golden's already committed. I would also say that there's a kid named Ryan Williams who's a 5-star receiver out of Alabama, the state of Alabama, and he has reclassified. He was supposed to be for the class of 2025 coming out of high school. He's reclassified, kind of the Quinn Ewers thing, and he's coming in 2024, and he's supposed to make an official visit to Texas at the end of this month. And the quarterback commitment for 2025 is a kid named KJ Lacey, who's from the same area, same school, and he's going to be here that weekend when Ryan Williams comes in for a visit too. So keep an eye on that. As far as veteran receivers, young receivers, Sark's looking to stockpile that position because that's what he wants.
But he's losing a lot.
Yeah, he is.
Right, you're losing your top
receiver,
three receivers.
D-tackle, and safety is where you're seeing a lot of attrition at Texas right now.
And you got the two guys in transfer portal, Casey Kane and Isaiah Nayor, who left. So in total, you're losing 5 of those guys. So, and also keep this in mind for this kid, Silas Bolden, because you just talked about, you mentioned C.J. Daniels. They're very different. I mentioned you probably could take both of these guys, considering the attrition you've had at wide receiver. They also need a punt returner because they're losing Xavier Worthy. They need a punt returner, and this kid, Silas Bolden, can return punts, and you look at his stature, and
he'll remind you of Keontae Turpin from the
Cowboys.
He
looks like a guy.
KaVontae Turpin.
Yeah, he actually returned a punt for a touchdown last season, and he can return kicks. Between him and Matthew Golden, you would be golden when it comes to your return game. And like I said, you can still have your 6'2", 200 guy, C.J. Daniels, and also something to consider. And C.J. Vogel brought this up. I thought it was a really good point. They are going to really miss Jay Witt's blocking.
Yes.
Because none of the receivers block like him, and he's such an enthusiastic blocker and so effective. Even Sark says he's the best blocking wide receiver in the conference. I wonder what wide receiver is going to take that role, take that role in his offense. Because with all those screens, the wide receiver screens, the running back screens, the quick screens, the swing screens, you need a great blocker, and oftentimes Jay Witt would be that guy. He put him in motion. He'd be a lead blocker.
He would be, and he's a bigger bodied guy.
Yeah.
And remember,
thick.
Thick. And
used to play running back.
Especially at the beginning of the year, A.D. Mitchell was having a hard time with his blocking assignments on those same plays, and he got better as the year went on. But it was struggle early. So it's an art. It's an art form to be a receiver that can get downfield and block and be willing to do that.
Good stuff there from the guys on Hook 'em Up with Ian Rod B. Weekday morning, 6 to 11 right here on The Horn. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the text line, 512-447-3776. If you want to talk NFL coaching cycle, NFL playoffs, if you want to talk about the national championship game last night, Texas Longhorns, basketball, football, we can go to any of that as well. Send that in the Big Fat Poll. Who's the best big game performer of all time? Send all those in on the text line. You know what? For the rest of the show, phone line, I've unblocked the phones. They're open. I don't know if anybody's going to call in. If you want to call, we may go to the phone line at some point. If I run out of things to talk about, I'll go to the phone line. We'll put that on the table as well going forward into 2024. We want to try and incorporate the phone line into the world here on the Sports Complex. But we'll keep it rolling here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 101.9 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Bowie all week. Bowie all week for his birthday is what we're playing here on the Horn. Musical theme of the week. Text lines open 512-447-3776. Phone lines open too. 512-447-3776 is one number to remember. Make it a little bit easier for you. Text line is rolling right now, though. We are asking you who is the biggest best big game performer of all time, so I should say. We're also asking if you got any takes on the game last night, if you've got any takes on the coaching carousel in the NFL, playoffs in the NFL. Texas being ranked number 3. We'll get to that in a little bit more. Texas men's basketball coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. We'll get into that as well. Big game tonight against Cincinnati at 6 o'clock. We'll get into all that. But text in, call in 512-447-3776. Texter says, did J.J. McCarthy really only have 10 completions? Yeah. They didn't throw the ball very much. They didn't have to. They got some big throws in there for sure. Getting those, picking up third downs on money downs when you had to sell out to stop the run. You know, they had to stop that, but that's Michigan. Just bully ball. Just play bully ball. And if I'm Washington, I trade for Justin Fields. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I probably don't like it if you have Eric Bieniemy still. I don't know if that's exactly the style. I'd want to have the right coach in. If I had the right coach that I felt, okay, this guy's going to work really well with Justin Fields, I may do it, but I'm going to get Justin Fields before I get the coach. Right? If that trade's going to happen, or do I need to get the coach first and then get Justin Fields? So I feel like you've got to get the coach because you don't want to, if you get Justin Fields and then you're hiring a coach, then everyone's going to say they're going to use him, but they're all in the back of their head thinking, well, I'm going to get rid of that guy and get my guy in there. So I'm there that I think it could work. It also depends on what Chicago wants. Like, if Chicago wants a ton for him, then I'm not going to go trade everything and then for a guy that I'm not sure is there and I got to pay coming up sooner. I'd rather take a shot in the draft and go with that if I'm the team than lock myself in on a guy who may not be the guy. Because we're seeing that stuff with Jacksonville right now. So you have Trevor Lawrence, and he's just good enough. He's a good enough quarterback that he's got to be your guy. You're probably not going to find someone better. You can find a lot of guys worse. But then you're also got to pay him a ton of money to be the guy. But, I mean, Dallas, a lot of people thought that about Dak Prescott. A lot of people thought that he was not going to be there. And then we see what he's done this season. He's looked really good. We'll see what he does in the playoffs. But he's looked really good this season. Was in the MVP polling up until the very end. Had a couple of missteps at the end there. Texter says, Michael Jordan. Yeah, Michael Jordan's going to be an easy one. A great big game performer. It's just a lunatic of what he was able to accomplish as somebody that, you know, everything that went on in his life. And it's weird to think what Michael Jordan would do in today's game. And I don't mean that like, we know he'd still be really good playing in today's game where you could score. And I don't like well, you put up 90 a game because no handshake. It's like, well, the game's different. But you're also still not it's not like any of those guys, if they weren't handshake, would put up 90. He would be great, of course. He'd still be great. He put up really good numbers. But I'm curious of like his attitude and his way of approaching the game, of how toxic it would be considered in today's game. And it doesn't work unless you have Scottie Pippen, who basically would just pint everything up and then sign a really bad contract and then get madder and madder and then take it out. And then Michael Jordan would walk away and he'd take it out on everybody else. And then Michael Jordan would come back and be like, all right, let's go. And he just every once in a while just vents everything out. But yeah, I mean, it's a curious one to see what he would do in today's game. Just mentality wise, to try and be that guy. I mean, I guess it worked for Kobe, it worked for Shaq, it works for guys that want to be that, you know, super aggressive guy. But I don't know, punching teammates doesn't seem like it's as good. We'll talk Draymond Green an hour or two. How about that? But punching teammates. Speaking of punching teammates, Texter says VY hands down for the best big game performers. That dude was Superman in the moment. Yes, I agree. VY was. There's a great story Joel Klatt was telling. I believe it was Joel Klatt was telling about that in an Oklahoma State game that Texas down at half, and they're in there, and Mac Brown's getting pissed off, and he's hooting and hollering, and Vince Young stands up, tells Mac Brown, "Don't worry." He tells him to leave. He tells to everybody, "Don't worry, I got it," and then turns the music back on. and then goes out and kills it in the second half, and the Longhorns win. That's apparently a story that happened with Vince Young, of just a guy who could turn it on at any level and just go dominate. If go look that up on the internet, I'll see if I can find it and retweet it. But yeah, really good stuff there. Reggie Miller is another one. Reggie Miller, it's still like, and I know there was tons of good shooting guards, but if you just look at what his accomplishments were and like how many All-Star games he made and all NBAs and all that stuff, he's really he's not a top guy. Like, he's top 8, top 75 probably still, but he's not, he gets put in that conversation with Jordan, and he's just not, because he couldn't play defense, because he was a three-point shooter. Now, he would dominate in today's game as well, not having to play defense and being able to shoot threes. But Reggie Miller, he was clutch. He had those moments where he was the best player on the court. But yeah, just another guy. He's always an anomaly to me when you do like he's one of those guys that if you don't watch the game film and you just look at the numbers, it doesn't add up. His playoff numbers weren't great either, actually. But it's just a weird thing if you look at that. Texture, I went to David Bowie. We just played some Suffragette City for you there. If you guys do have more David Bowie songs you want to play, you got some hits. I'm not going to play anything I've already played twice, but if you got something else you want to hear from intro music for David Bowie, let me know in the text line. Reggie Jackson, Michael Jordan, and Tom Brady. I like that. That's 3 good ones right there. That is 3 good ones there for sure. Chan says, also chat about the Texas men's basketball situation. The perimeter defense is concerning. It is. There's a lot of concerning about the team right now. We'll learn more tonight. I'll get into that in the next, but I don't want to pace out my show, Chan. But I appreciate you listening. But that's it. That is in our. We'll talk about that in the 5 o'clock. And I don't believe Jalen F listens to Sam S. Nonetheless, kudos to Rod for guessing the song. Look, I mean, I'm guessing that the staff who put it together. I'm guessing that UT has a really good program, and they always have a good people that put together the highlights and all these packages. If you follow them on Instagram, like the men's basketball team and the football team and all that, they're really good at putting that stuff together. I'm sure those people do it. I bet those people listen to Sam Smith. And best to Jalen Ford. Do well in the NFL, and we will be watching him on Sundays. I've seen everything. He's ranked around the 10th best linebacker in the draft, so probably not an early pick. But somebody that is definitely going to be you could definitely feel he was going to be on a roster for a long time or a practice squad, and he's going to be one of those guys that will continue to be around the game for a while to see what they can pull out of him. And a couple things that he just has to fix or get better at. I don't want to say fix because there aren't problems, but just a few things to get better at and keep improving, which I think with different coaching and playing at a higher level will definitely help him get there. And yes, all the best to Jalen Ford. All right, we're going to keep the text line rolling here. We get into the 5 o'clock hour. We're going to talk some more of the national championship game. We'll talk a little bit more Texas football and Texas basketball as well. The Big 12 is some of the bigger games. They kicked off this weekend, but some big games happening tonight. If you want to watch up and catch up now that football season is officially over for college, if you want to start getting into college basketball, some good games to watch tonight. We'll get into that when we come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex on the Horn. Getting into some more national championship talk. Little Texas football and their final placement in the polls came out today in the AP poll. Good news for Texas. I like that. I like what they came out in that. Texas basketball has a big game against Cincinnati tonight. Some other big names in the Big 12. We'll get into all of those. Some NBA if we got time. And, of course, more of your text messages. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. It's a phone number, too. I've opened up the phones. I don't know if we'll have time to get to anybody or not, but they're open. They're open. 512-447-3776. We are asking you today, you got some national championship talk, if you've got some college basketball talk, if you got some NBA talk, if you got some NFL talk, or the big fat poll of the day, who is the best big game player in sports history? Send that one in as well. A text here says Robert Horry, obviously. Look, Robert Horry is definitely on the list. I think he was a bigger clutch player than big game player. I don't know if his games, he necessarily had like 30-point games in the big games, but he was clutch. He was definitely a big moment guy. But I'm talking big game of a guy who you knew, hey, we need a big game. It's not that we need the one home run. It's this guy's going to get on base 4 times, or this guy's going to score 3 touchdowns, or this guy's going to put up 30 every time at least. He's going to get double-doubles and triple-doubles every big game. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of guy is what I'm talking about. Texter says, winning matters. MJ would just be fun in any era. I agree. Look, MJ, it's Michael Jordan. He's the greatest basketball player of all time. He would be fine. I'm more curious to see, like, if you saw him on a team where he comes in and he is just railing on people, how much they would now be like, well, no one wants to go play with him. And, I mean, look, he won with Steve Kerr, and he won with, nothing against Steve Kerr, but he won with some guys, Bill Whittington, some guys that maybe weren't the best. But, yeah, Tony Kukoc really good. Scottie Pippen was really good. He had some good players on his teams. But, if you take away Scottie Pippen, it changes the whole trajectory of that Bulls team. It changes the trajectory of everything. I'm just curious to see now if he has another superstar, does he find somebody? I could imagine, though, like Kevin Durant would just be like, no, I'll go play with that guy forever. Like, that guy wants to win as bad as I want to win, and he'll fight everybody else, and me and him will just dominate. I can see that, too. But, yeah, of course, I did not mean to imply that Michael Jordan would not be a winner if he was in any other era. I did not mean to apply that at all. Text line's still open. We're still going, but let's talk a little bit about the national championship game. If you did miss it, if you were hiding away from it because you did not want to get into, you didn't want to watch any more college football after Texas got knocked out, if it was too painful, it was more painful to watch the game. It was painful to see a Washington team that looks like it felt like getting to the championship took everything out of them. That when they got there, they weren't quite the same team. Not having a month to prepare definitely wasn't it was noticeable. That they weren't able to put together a game plan that was going to be able to dominate. They did make some good in-game adjustments. Michigan came out early in the game and looked dominant. It looked like it could have been a massive blowout early in the game. Washington was able to weather that storm, come back, get some points on the board, kind of slow down Michigan a little bit more. And they were breaking explosive plays, which nobody had done all season long. On Washington, they were breaking explosive plays. Edwards has 2 big breakthrough touchdowns. Corum has 2 touchdowns as well on the ground. Especially in the first half, all Texas fans are calling for the head of Sark for not running the ball the whole game, which I think we saw that it would have slowed down as it went on, that the Texas O-line was not able to handle. Braylon Trice, they were able to handle him well enough on that edge as well to not let him get in and cause problems. But that's, as long as you run the ball more and more and more, they had to devote more resources to it. The question was going to be, if Texas kept doing it, would they have ever made that switch? We never got to find that out. It's a learning experience for everybody involved. But, it was much more, that's not Texas' identity, is bully ball, run the ball nonstop all day, especially once Jonathan Brooks went out. And it is Michigan's. J.J. McCarthy only throws the ball 18 times, 10 receptions, 10 completions, 140 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He runs for another 30 or so yards. But Blake Corum gets 134 yards on the ground. Edwards gets 104 yards on the ground. And Michigan's able to kind of cruise. They do get the lead in this game and never really looked back. Washington had not played from behind that long all season long. And so it kind of put them in a position where they then felt they had to be more take more shots. But the problem was Washington likes to take shots. They don't like to do it when they don't want to. Dillon Johnson has 11 carries for 33 yards. They weren't getting in more favorable positions, which meant Michael Penix Jr. was throwing shorter passes, and those were getting broke up because Michigan's going to play bully ball. Michigan's linebackers and cornerbacks and stuff were hard at tackling, and when they tackled, they were trying to take you to the ground hard. They were trying to take Washington receivers down to make them regret catching 4 or 5 yard passes. You saw that over the middle, that they were trying to take away the sidelines, make them throw it over the middle, and trust their tackling. It didn't always work, but when it did, it showed a lot of promise. Penix ends up going 27 for 51, which every Texas fan, that's what kills him. 27 for 51, missing some passes that there was pressure, but Texas had pressure too. Texas had pressured Washington. I know they weren't getting home, but they had pressured Washington as much as any other team had. They had pressured Washington in that game. The number that kills me was you saw the big plays against Texas and being able to get those plays to just open it up and get the ball downfield and make up chunk yards against Texas. It was a 5 yard average per pass for Michael Penix. They really just took it out, that the pass rush was so good that they were able to get the guys outside. And then you saw the entire defensive line where Texas was lacking this season, where the edges for Michigan were just far superior to the edges for Texas. And with those guys being able to get the pressure outside, meant that they had to devote more resources to the outside than were inside, which ends up with the inside now being able to get pressure up the middle, and they were then giving Michael Penix fits. You really wish Texas could have had the edges get some more pressure to not allow the double teams on Tavondre Sweat, to allow one-on-one with Tavondre and Byron Murphy coming up the middle, and it could have been a very different game there as well. It's unfortunate that you watch that game and you see a Washington team that Texas feels that they maybe didn't get the good end of that flip, that Washington ends up playing better. But look, all hats off to Michigan and credit to Michigan. They came in with the right game plan. They were going to play bully ball. They ended up matching up against a team that they could play bully ball against in Washington, and they were able to walk away with it. The score looks a little bit more one-sided than it actually was. In all reality, it wasn't as bad as they made it out to be. It was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. You know, it wasn't necessarily just the worst blowout you've ever seen in national championship history. We've seen worse games for sure. We have definitely seen worse games. We saw that, look, as much as if you want to give problems for Texas for not being able to get to the quarterback, Michigan had 1 sack in the game. They sacked Penix once. So we can say Michael Penix gets the ball off. Now, he was missing passes. The pressure was there a little bit more that he was missing guys. He was throwing the ball out. He threw a couple picks in the game as well. One of them wasn't really, one of them was kind of a throwaway pick. He had to get rid of the ball. It's 4th down. But, you see what happens. You think at the end of that first half, Washington is coming down. They get the score with about a minute left. Michigan's not able to respond. They have to punt the ball back. Washington takes a knee. You feel like momentum is all firmly in Washington's hands. And then Michael Penix Jr. throws the first pass of the second half as an interception. And, man, it just was never really looking back that if you look and you say Washington is able to drive on that possession, that they're able to take and continue momentum. But momentum is such a big part of these college football games for young players, how much that momentum means. And for Michael Penix, he may have made the biggest mistake right there at the beginning of the second half. But, yeah, Texas fans wish they could go back in time and play that Washington team. Not the case. Michigan gets to win 34-13. But it does result that people seem to have respect in the Associated Press for Texas and what they did against a Washington team that looked unbeatable when they played them. And Texas gets to number 3 in the final poll. There is the backwards way that if technically they were to vacate Michigan's championship, I believe the AP poll would take precedent, and it goes to not the team that loses in the championship game, but then the next highest ranked team. I know it's a weird system that's set up that way. And no one in Texas really wants to get a vacated. That's the way you win a championship after losing the last game of the season. But technically, it's a thing. I'm just pointing it out. We're not rooting for that. Good off to Michigan. I know some people are still angry about it and want to be called out as cheaters. Everybody's cheating. Everybody's cheating. It just is what it is. Sport. That's showing to recruits that come together and say that Texas is the best team that was out of the championship game, that they had the best season, was great to see. And happy for Texas getting to number 3. I want to get to some NCAA basketball as well, but I want to get back to the text line, 512-447-3776. We're asking you who is the best big game player of all time, because Michael Penix wasn't. I thought he might have been. I thought he may be able to will this Washington team to victory. He did not. So we're asking you that. If you got those in any sport, anytime, all time, any sport, you can put that one in there. And anything else you want to talk about, you guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. Back on the text line, though, Mark Lemke, second baseman for the Atlanta Braves back in the day. Unbelievable player in the playoffs. I like that. Robert Horry, Big Shot Bob, 7 rings. Look, I think Bob, and trust me, Robert Horry was one of those guys that, especially when he was a Spur, and then you go back and watch stuff, you watch him on other teams, people don't remember how good of a defender he was. He's remembered a lot for his shots, but, man, he was just his basketball IQ was through the roof, just a really good player all around. Made some huge plays on both ends of the court. I still don't think he's the best big game performer, but clutch-wise, he may be one of the most clutch players of all time. Roger Staubach is who you got there. Roger Staubach, look, it's a little bit before my time. Big D Torres, I can't tell you if I did not watch him play. I'm sure he was a great in-game performer, but he was a little bit before my time, so I did not get to watch him play. Big game performance, there's a case to be made for Robert Horry. Again, clutch game, 100%. If you want to say big game, I'd still say it's Steph Curry. I'd still say Kevin Durant. I'd still say, like, those great players that just always show up in those moments. I'd say those guys. Because Robert Horry, you think and you go, I can remember 9 moments, 10 moments, something like that, which is great. A lot of people don't have that. But I can't remember games where I went, oh, man, 30 points for Robert Horry tonight. And that's what I'm saying. But I appreciate everybody going with that. For clutch-wise, he's definitely – and look, the crazy part is he has a case for Hall of Fame now. That's the crazy part. Text says, last week he was dropping balls in a 6-inch window. Last night he missed a guy open by 6 yards. Yes, that was a problem. And part of it is the pressure, that there was a lot of those throws that he was getting pushed back, and that even though it wasn't a sack, he was getting – I get that. I don't want to take credit away from Michigan that there was those guys. He was getting some pressure and still putting the ball out on time, on schedule, and getting it out. It felt like he got flustered in that game and never got back to normal. And everyone in that game, but that's why you play bully ball. That's why they call it bully ball. Bullies fluster you. And just being able to have that every single time they're putting it on you and hurting you. Alabama tries to do that to Texas when we played in the last couple of years. Alabama comes out, and when they hit you, they try and go extra hard. And Texas tries to play, I don't want to say they don't. I think they do it against other opponents. I don't know if they've had the skill level and the athletes and the top guys to be able to do that. But Michigan played bully ball, and it worked. Michigan showed how soft Texas is, especially tackling. I don't think it's soft. I think if you look at the hardest guy, it's like going and saying, well, Brock Lesnar really shows you how soft one of the lightweights is. Or Brock Lesnar shows you how soft John Jones is. You're like, well, no, but he's just much bigger. He's just a giant beast of a man. And that was Michigan. They recruited, they got guys. Sark is a speed guy. So it's not even toughness. Sark wants speed. Michigan didn't care about speed. Michigan wants toughness. Michigan wants guys who are going to shovel the driveway and then get tackled onto a concrete in the snow. That's who Michigan wants. That's who Harbaugh wanted. And it's a different style, but Sark's not going to be able to coach those guys. Sark's not going to coach bully ball. He just isn't. And that's what they do. It doesn't always work. Bully ball is a fine window. We saw they lost the last 2 years because finesse can beat bully ball a lot if you can get the ball out and you can game plan correctly. I don't think Washington game plan correctly for it. Caitlin Clark, that's a good poll. Iowa. Caitlin Clark, more 40-point games at Iowa than Iowa football in the last 2 years. It's not a great number for Iowa football. But that's also when you look at Michigan, and I had to tell my buddy who was telling oh, Michigan, we can – our defense stops everybody. I'm like, you stop everybody in the Big Ten. Calm down. There are some awful offensive teams in the Big Ten. We know that. My man Joe from Brody Lane says, Big Shot Bob. Look, I get it. I'm just saying Big Bob is a moments. He is a clutch player, but I wouldn't say big game performer. Just saying a little bit difference. Akeem, yeah. And Akeem, look, Akeem's best games, as a Spurs fan, those came against us when David won the MVP, and that is brutal. T-Dog. That is brutal. But yeah, it came, and like that's what's funny is when you go into these best big game performers, you're kind of actually looking at a list of like who doesn't disappear in big games. Great players that play even better when they're in those moments. And that's why, like, for me, Vince Young's in there because Vince Young didn't necessarily always perform. Like, he took time off, I think. You know, when he could just win a game without having to be the greatest player in football, he kind of did that at points. Maybe one of the reasons he didn't win the Heisman. And that's not a shot at Vince Young. He still won. He still won every one of those games. He didn't have to do anything more. But instead of going, well, I win every game by 70 because I'm just that good. But then he could turn it on. Like, I think we may not even, you know, you saw it of course, in the championship game. But VUI, man, in college, I don't know if there was a better guy that you would want to have on your team that you could just say, well, he's on my team. I feel like our odds of winning are above 50%. Don't even tell me who the rest of the team is. Just tell me VUI's at quarterback. And I feel like we got pretty good odds. Arborhorn81 says, Team Sports, Joe Montana, Michael Jordan, and Reggie Jackson. I like those. Those are all good names. Very good big game performers. Appreciate it, Arborhorn81 there. Text line still open, 512-447-3776. Best big game performers of all time. If you want to talk some Texas football, some national championship, NFL, all that is up there as well, NBA as well. I do want to get into a little Texas basketball before we hit the break. Texas is taking on Cincinnati. Texas still ranked number 25. A lot of people starting to get into the thought that Texas may be overranked at 25. Which is not what we want to see, that they were playing some of the lower level teams, didn't blow them out the way they needed to, that there's been some problems, that the offense hasn't quite clicked the way it needed to click, where you were expecting to be a little bit more dynamic offensively. You were expecting IT Horton to be a little bit better of a shooter. You expected Max Abmas to be really electric. I think you expected Max Abmas to be closer to 30 points a night pretty regularly. And, you know, maybe that was wishing too much there. I think when you thought Dylan Dessou came back, that him and Shedrick would be able to work together a little bit better. They haven't just been able to really get in a flow together yet. You're leaving Brock Cunningham out there because, you know, it's a team that has not necessarily played together a ton. You know, having those transfers and trying to bring in a new team, it's just difficult. We saw it with Texas with what they had to do to wait for Jabari Rice and when Jabari Rice came in, but Timmy Allen and Marcus Carr and a lot of those guys, Christian Bishop, that it took a little bit for everybody to merge and get used to playing with each other and knowing where everybody is without the ball. And so for Texas, they're still in that point. So they have Brock Cunningham on a lot because he's the best vocal leader on the court. You need to have some of the other guys become better vocal leaders for Texas in this game. And, you know, and my man Chan's brought it up a lot. The perimeter defense needs to step up. Max Abmas, you know, he's a smaller guy. You need to be able to trust your rim protectors. You need to be able to trust them so you can kind of play up and guys can play tighter on defense. I don't know if they trust the rim protection, so they're trying to play a little bit looser on the edge, and guys are hitting threes over them. Guys are being able to score over them. They're falling into places. They're not necessarily calling through the screens. Communication. This communication on this team, defensively and offensively, just needs to improve a ton as the season continues. It's hard. It's hard when they're not family. It's hard when it's a new team every year, and you maybe don't have that comfort level yet. Hopefully they'll continue to find it. You're playing a team in Cincinnati tonight who upset a BYU team who is a ranked team right now. They're ranked number 18. They upset them in the first game. They do have some big guys. Another thing you worry about with Texas, that there are some big guys on the Cincinnati team. They have 3 guys that are around 7 feet tall. 2 of them are 2 of their leading scorers, and Victor Kaninan, which is a 6'11" Russian, who is going to come in there. He's their leading scorer. Aziz Bandago, 7-footer from Senegal, he's played in 7 games this year. He's playing really well. They're both averaging close to a double-double. You're also going to have Dan Skillings Jr., who's another good player on the edge, 6'6" as a guard, which it makes it a little bit harder for some of those edge perimeter guys to defend. You're just going to have to be able to go in there and bump. Dylan Mitchell can't bump as much, so you're going to see more Brock Cunningham. You're going to see Dylan Dessou, Caden Shedrick. Can they stay out of foul trouble, get in there, but then also bump down there and get them in foul trouble? That for Texas, with all of your other problems, if you can slow the game down for the other team, you're one of the slowest offenses in the game right now. For Texas is, if you're going to be slow, you have to get to the free throw line. You can't be slow and expect to get open shots. It's just not as easy to do. So Texas is going to have to be able to get down there and get some shots in the paint for this game to be, to win this game. And if you go on to in Big 12 play, people start to worry. But you're on the road right now against a good Cincinnati team that upset BYU in game 1. What can you do against this big team with a lot of size in Cincinnati. That game's coming up at 6. Also on the docket tonight for Big 12, number 2 Houston is up against Iowa State. This should be an interesting game. This is a game of Houston is 134th in scoring offense. They're first in scoring defense. This is a Houston team that plays a lot of defense. The offense hasn't been figured out, but Iowa State shoots 50% from the field. Iowa State's a really good offensive team. It's going to be a fun shootout to see if Houston's defense is really good enough against this Big 12, if they're going to be able to continue to play at that, and if their non-scoring ways are going to come back to bite them against Iowa State. You also have BYU versus Baylor. The number 18 BYU versus number 4 Baylor. This is going to be a 3-point shootout, guys. And so if you don't like 3-pointers in the game today, you may not want to watch this one, but another good matchup to keep your eye out. Some good young players for Baylor as well you want to keep your eyes out for. And Jacoby Walter and Missy, who are both going to be freshmen, playing really well. Ray J. Dennis, the transfer to Toledo, also a big name for Baylor you want to keep an eye out. But Baylor is number 1 in threes per game in the country, not the Big 12, in the country. Number 1 in threes per game. BYU, is number 1 in threes per game. Baylor is number 1 in 3-point percentage. So this is going to be a shootout, but some good Big 12 action for everybody to keep up on. If you're trying to get into some college basketball, get into the Big 12, see where Texas is going to be. They play at 6, but some other big games happening as well. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get some more of your text messages, play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B as we continue here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 and 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the sports complex here in the home. Playing Bowie all week long. David Bowie's birthday would have been on Monday, so we're playing him all week long on the show. Do you really need a good excuse to play some great classic music here on the sports complex? So we'll be playing David Bowie all week. If you got more songs you want to hear, let us know in the text line, 512-447-3776. You guys are being mean about my hero, David Robinson. That was my guy growing up. Work David Robinson. Like, I can't even say that. Terrible hating on David Robinson, the model citizen David Robinson. Great guy, and y'all are hating on him. Keem also, it's crazy that both those guys, so good. Both really good, like, just good people as well. Neither is Steph. Reason Iguodala was finals MVP. Steph has been really good at points, but yes, Iggy did step up into that finals as well, and the defense was huge. Steph does not necessarily perform great on defense at any point. Big Papi, hands down. Also, I like that one. Sam Ellinger, Colt McCoy, and Vince Young. I like that. I love a little Texas love there. I don't know why Let's Work Together Canned Heat. I don't know if that's something you want me to play on the. We're playing David Bowie though. Is David Bowie in Canned Heat? Do I not know this? Is this a trivia question that I don't know? I do not believe he is. Jared Roundrock says Jose Altuve and Kobe Bryant and Wayne Gretzky. Yeah, Jose Altuve, I think, is getting up there. I don't know if there was a great part. The problem is that everyone will always say that he cheated in that year, which he didn't. He just didn't. The rest of the team did. Look up the numbers. Do some research, people. But Jose Altuve was not a cheater and had that really great season. But the rest of his team was cheating, so it does hurt a little bit. And Joe says, the original Bowie version, always good, very good. Yes. And Colt McCoy was, Jerry Democrat 77 says, Colt McCoy was clutch. He just knew how to win. And he says, Bob Ballou hates on Tim. Yes, we know. We know, Nate. We know, Nate. You mentioned working together earlier. Yes, I did mention. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being a DJ for me there. I don't see them always right when they come in because it's hard to have a flow of thought and read at the same time. So I can't always read them right when they come in. And then in my brain, I forget everything immediately. Don't know why I have no bad memory, but I do. Trying to remember these names every day kills me. Text line's open. We're gonna play you some more sound about the from Hook 'em Up with Dean Rabi, talking some about the Cowboys matchup with the Packers. Some good stuff from this morning on another Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
All right, let's get to some NFL playoff discussion here. I was looking at some of the numbers for Jordan Love, and I realized that a lot of Cowboys fans and even myself, and I know Jordan Love has played well, but I just didn't realize how good of a season Jordan Love had this year, his first year as a starter. You can make the argument that Jordan Love, this was a breakout year for him as a first year as a starter. Now, there's been a lot of talk about C.J. Stroud and how great he has been, and he has been the greatest rookie campaign in the history of the NFL. So that's more the talk about him as a rookie and his first year as a starter, of course. But Jordan Love, of course, he's been sitting on the bench, and the Packers, they have a certain way they go about grooming and developing their quarterbacks. And Jordan Love this year, after he settled down, now at one point he was 2-5, and most people had given up on Jordan Love and probably stopped paying attention. But since then, at least in the last 8 games, he's got 18 touchdowns, 20 total, 1 interception, 6-2 record in those 8 games, a 112.7 passer rating. If you go look at overall what they had to deal with, he didn't have his starting left tackle. Bakhtiari, I think, started 1 game the entire season. Didn't have what was projected to be their top number 1 wide receiver in Christian Watson. No 1,000-yard receiver. Aaron Jones, the top running back, missed 6 games, I believe. Luke Musgrave is another one of their top weapons. He missed 6 games. I mean, so they had a lot of young guys playing. A lot of rookies are playing for Green Bay.
I think it's the youngest roster in the league.
Yeah, a lot of rookies are
certainly
playing.
Certainly in the NFC.
Yeah, and when he's targeting rookies, you would think that the production drops off. It doesn't. He's completing 70% of his passes targeting rookies with a 112 passer rating. Only 2 interceptions this season when he's targeting a rookie. I'm telling you, it's really impressive what they're doing right now. And 87% of his yards, I'm rounding up, are to first or second year players. And getting back to your point about one of the youngest rosters in the league, I just, for those who don't know, who haven't been paying attention, he's had a phenomenal year. If you look at the most total touchdowns in the NFL, he's fourth behind Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Jordan Love.
They're a weird team, Rod, and
Yeah.
I'll give you a little stat on that because it's good to be friends with Aaron Rodgers apparently. Because Alan Lazard, remember when the Jets?
Yeah.
He made $11 million this year with the Jets.
Wow.
The entire receiving corps for the Packers combined makes $7.5 million. Alan Lazard, Aaron Rodgers got him paid cash.
Yeah.
It's good to be his friend.
Friend of Aaron. You're right.
And remember, they also had Aaron Jones hurt for a while, and he's come back.
he
Their
missed
best
6
running back.
games.
Yeah. Well, they're a weird team, Rod. You know, they lost to Pittsburgh, the Steelers, back in November. At 23-19 in Pittsburgh, and they fell to 3-6.
Mm-hmm.
Then they went on a 3-game winning streak where they beat the Chargers, the Lions, and the Chiefs. I mean, 2 playoff teams, and the Chargers are talented. They beat them all. They beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead 27-16. They were 6-6. Then they lost 2 straight to the Giants. They went to New York and lost to the Giants.
Yeah.
Then they lost to Tampa, and then they finished with 3 straight wins. They beat Carolina, Minnesota, and Chicago to make the playoffs. So they're one of those weird teams. That sounds like a young team,
They're
right?
just inconsistent.
Yeah, they're young.
Like a young quarterback would be. But I mean, he's trending the right direction in the last 8 games or so. You're talking about one of the top 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the league, performance-wise, in the last 8 games. That's crazy to think. You're like, that's not true. No, 18 touchdowns passing, 20 total, with only 1 interception in the last 8 games.
Yeah, if you go back to that stretch,
phenomenal.
remember that I think the only time I really watched the Packers this year was the 2 games that they won that were impressive, where they beat Detroit on Thanksgiving
That was impressive.
and were really good.
I watched them in
Detroit's a playoff team, and then
Yeah.
they beat Kansas City the following week, and that was controversial at the end, the officiating and whatnot. That was the Sunday night game, but that was 2 huge wins for them. But then somehow they lose to the Giants and the Tampa Bay Bucks, and then you just remind yourself that's the youngest roster in the NFC. That's what young teams do.
Yeah.
But if the Cowboys catch the good Packers with Aaron Jones healthy, they can be a handful. I mean, the Cowboys are favored by 7.5 for a reason, and should have a way to win this. But don't take them lightly, that's for sure.
Do not, exactly. I mean, he's got the most starts this season for any quarterback with multiple passing touchdowns with 0 interceptions. The last QB to do that as a first-year starter was Roger Staubach in 1971. Like I said, I know there's been a lot of talk about the young QB play of C.J. Stroud because he's a prodigy. He's extraordinary. But Jordan Love, who was not a rookie, he's been sitting a while, but his first year as a starter, he's been the second half of the season, he's been really, really good. And you just brought up a point that worries me as a quasi-Cowboys fan, the return of Aaron Jones. Because he's only played 6 games, he only missed 6 games, but the last 3 games, he's really kind of found his form because he's been dealing with injuries all season long, and maybe he's just starting to get healthy. Last 3 games, 22 rushes, 111 yards, 8 first downs, 20 carries, 120 yards, 6 first downs, 21 rushes, 127 yards, 8 first downs. That's his last 3 games, and he's been getting more and more efficient. If you go look at success rate, 63, 70, and 71. Last time the Cowboys played the Packers, and I don't want to remind the Cowboys of it because I know that was a heartbreaking loss in overtime, he had 138 yards. They had 207 yards rushing in that game.
And how teams who've beaten the Cowboys, they run the ball.
They run the ball.
They run the rock,
You know that.
and have a quarterback that doesn't turn it over, and that's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love and Aaron Jones. Because somebody said, how the hell the Packers seemingly hit on every quarterback? Remember, it's the Packer way. I mean,
It's been that way for years.
when they drafted Aaron Rodgers, let him sit for 2 seasons, and then in year 3 it was his turn. And same thing happens with Jordan Love. They don't rush quarterbacks on the field and let them learn the game a little bit.
It's the Packer way, man.
Yeah,
It's a smart way to do business.
And and as you just pointed out, I mean, they're 9-8 this year, and in the playoffs, they're ahead of schedule a little bit for the youngest roster as they moved on from the Aaron Rodgers era, and now they're moving into the Jordan Love era, and this is the first year of that, and it looks like it's on an ascent with these young players.
It's like I said, and I've compared the Oklahoma football program and the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to the Packers at one point too. It's really hard to hit on 3 Hall of Famers in a row. I'm not saying Jordan Love's a Hall of Famer at all, but he's definitely not going to be a bust, right? It seems like we're past the bust phase of it. Like the Steelers had 3 Hall of Fame coaches in a row. Oklahoma Sooners, were they going to have 3 Hall of Fame coaches in a row? Probably not with Brent Venables, but we'll see. held Texas baseball, dealing with that too, right? To have 3 Hall of Fame coaches in a row, 3 Hall of Fame anything in a row is really tough. But I will say that if anybody can do it, the Packers can do it. They can be that kind of organization that could do it. So once again, throwing it out there, Jordan Love. If you haven't been paying attention, he's one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL the last 2 weeks, and Aaron Jones is now getting healthy. Those are your biggest concerns if you're a Cowboys fan. But there's a reason you're favored by a touchdown.
Yeah, and you're at home where you've been dominant for the last 2 seasons, and you're 8-0 this year. You like having them in your building. The Cowboys play very fast on that field, without a doubt. And we've said this. There are a couple teams that are trending in a real good direction. I mean, the Rams are a team that have won 7 of 8, as I've mentioned, into the playoffs. The Packers have won 3 in a row into the playoffs, and those are, over in the AFC, it's the Bills that are the hottest team, and then the teams that are sinking, right? The Eagles are disintegrating in front of our eyes. The Dolphins seem to be trending in a bad direction at this point. So yeah, I mean it's about the playoffs, and the Cowboys, they're kind of right where they want to be at 12-5 and another real good season. And we, would have said this back in September when the season began. Cowboys, if they're 12-5 entering the playoffs, this will now determine what their season is, because this is where Mike McCarthy has delivered. Now it's about what does this look like the next 3 weeks, because if you can play the NFC Championship game, it'll be a successful season.
And also, since we're on it, I'll give props to, and because nobody's really done it, to Brian Gutekunst, the GM for
Aaron Rodgers' favorite
Packers. Guy. I mean, he got dogged because Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers would do you dirty in the court of public opinion. That's Jimmy Kimmel. Like he'll dog you because he just he's got a big platform, and he'll go viral with almost anything he says.
Jimmy
he knows
Kimmel
that.
had a monologue
and
last night.
Yeah, we can play some
about
of that
Karen
too.
Rodgers.
Yeah. But Aaron Rodgers has done that with a lot of people, right? He did it with Fauci. He'll do it with anybody. Like he'll just, he wants to pick on you, he's gonna pick on you. And he did it with Gutekunst. He just didn't like him. Remember, he said that he knows how to reach me and all that kind of stuff, and wouldn't answer the phone. And he said he only has FaceTime in his, like, in the place he was living. Like it was some weird. Yeah, it was such a weird little explanation. But anyway, give them credit, because look at where they are now, because they decided to be consistent in their methods and believe in their organizational kind of philosophy about quarterbacks. And they're like, no, we're moving on from Aaron. We're moving on. Jordan Love, you're the guy. You're the guy. We're giving it to Jordan Love. And it's paying off for him. And look at where the Jets are. Not saying they're cursed or anything, but Aaron Rodgers' ego, and obviously he has some bad luck with the injury, but it hasn't helped the Jets organization at all. And I think the Packers now are probably a little happy to be free of the toxicity of him. And by the way, Brian Gutekunst got 2 more MVPs out of Aaron Rodgers. But after they drafted Jordan Love, you got MVP performance out of him.
Well, because it lit a fire.
It did.
You've been trending in a bad direction.
Which, as a general manager, that's also your job to know.
That's right.
It was Bill Belichick's
100%.
job to know, if I keep drafting quarterbacks, it's going to piss off Tom Brady enough to go out there and work extra. He's never going to be satisfied. That Brady's actually better when he's got somebody breathing down his back, because he's always had it, even going back to his time as a Michigan man. He never had, and I think he learned that probably from Lloyd Carr. Like, no, don't give Brady the job. Let him fight for it. He's at his best that way.
Yeah.
His competitive sickness.
Yeah, and it did. And it almost, now it didn't lead to playoff success, unfortunately, for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, but there was going to be a divorce there, and it happened. And I'll give Gutekunst credit that he's gotten out from under that deal. Now it's the Jets' deal, the problem to deal with, and they only got 4 plays out of Aaron Rodgers this year. You got a young quarterback who got to emerge, go through some ups and downs, but now he has his team in the playoffs, and it is the youngest roster in the NFC.
Executive of the Year candidate too.
For sure.
Potential over there with Nick Caserio. Now you break it down.
I got Nick Caserio, but yes.
No, I agree with Caserio, but now that we're making the case, actually, it's not bad. It's not a bad case at all. So those are the things to be concerned about if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. But Cowboys right now, I mean, they're I just want to throw out a couple of superlatives about the Cowboys, things that they've done. First of all, Michael Parsons, he only had 1 pressure in that game last season, though. 2 seasons ago, where you played the Packers and you lost in overtime. He only had 1 pressure in that game. I went back and looked at some of the stats. But Michael Parsons, he got his 14th sack of the season in that last game. 5th NFL player since 1982, which is, I believe, when they started recording sacks, with at least 40 career sacks in his first 3 NFL seasons. Reggie White, Derek Thomas, Dwight Freeney, and Aldon Smith.
Ooh.
Think about, man, what a talent he was. He was with San Fran, right?
He was a
Early on?
great player. He was so quick
was.
twitch. That's why he kept getting so many chances.
Damn.
Talent wins, but yeah, he had an alcohol
Think about one of
issue.
those things that's not like the other.
Yeah.
But the thing with the Cowboys is this is why this year is so important, man. Because that guy's about to get paid. Like he's about to be the highest paid. He might be the highest paid defense player of all time. I think he will be that. But he's gonna rival some quarterbacks.
Yeah, he'll
Like
be
some
I
quarterback
think he'll be
play.
the highest paid. Well, based on what Bosa got, you kind of have to go north of that.
You
And
gotta
you're
go
right,
north
and
of
that's what we
Bosa.
said. I mean, the Cowboys' window is now because you got to pay him. You got to pay CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb.
You got to pay Deron Bland. And you've already paid, and you're already pretty heavy with your salary cap. And this is the window. This is the window. And you said this perfectly yesterday. For people that think Mike McCarthy is, the Cowboys are in a spot where, Mike McCarthy's now tied to Dak. Because you're also going to extend Dak. You're going to give Dak a new contract.
Yeah, he's
on
proven
top of this.
himself this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's led the NFL in touchdown thrown. He only threw 9 interceptions this year. And you have to give a lot of credit to Mike McCarthy. So people who say, well, you move on from Mike McCarthy, well, now he's the architect of this offense with Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
So you kind of need him.
Yeah.
If you're going to extend
But,
Dak.
yeah, at least have a plan. You better bring in someone who's just as capable, and that's hard to bring in. I mean, who's just as capable
Well,
as a
these
Super
two
Bowl
guys
winning
kind of built the
head
offense
coach.
together with Brian Schottenheimer was there too. But yeah, I mean, this is a real opportunity year for the Cowboys with what could be 2 home games. And then, if you're a Cowboys fan, you're rooting like hell for someone to knock off the 49ers. So you could play the NFC Championship game at home too, but that's unlikely because they don't have to play one game before that after a week off. So we'll see. But yeah, big opportunity here for the Cowboys.
Big opportunity for the Cowboys. We got to take a last break. We'll come back, wrap things up here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. We got to wrap things up here on the show. We'll be back tomorrow to break down more for you. But until then, hopefully Texas gets a win tonight against Cincinnati. Will be a big win. I know Texas ranked, Cincinnati is not, but after that win against BYU that Cincinnati had, it would be a big game. It'd be a big win on the road to show that Texas may have more in store than people may have thought. Some say overranked. Some say maybe there's some potential left. I know, Chan, you got to come on, Chan. Need some more positivity out of you, Chan. You think that men's basketball is going down again tonight? I'm hoping for the best. Yeah, I got to see something out of that team, though. I want to see some fight out of Texas tonight. We'll be back tomorrow to break it down, and whatever other news happens in the sports world, we'll get it to you here on the Sports Complex. But until then, be safe, be kind, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you here tomorrow, right? Same place, same time. Sports Complex.